Those who follow my channel have undoubtedly noticed my love for a video game series called The Legend of Heroes, or the Trails series. It's an incredible series, but I've already talked about that in numerous other videos, so this video is dedicated to the other major series made by developer Nihon Falcom, the East series, specifically the first two games of the series. I've been looking for a while to get into the East series, and finally got around to playing and beating both the first and second games of the series. The journey had its ups and downs, but I have arrived here to tell you why these old games are still worthwhile to play now, especially if you want to get into the series. First though, some history about East 1 and 2, and let me warn you, there's a lot of history with these two games. East 1, Ancient East Vanished, is the very first game in the action RPG series East, and was originally published all the way back in 1987 for the PC, or I should say a particular kind of PC, because there were many types at that point. The game was ported to many of the others given its success, and the following year in 1988, East 2, Ancient East Vanished, the final chapter was released. As the names indicate, the games are strongly connected, with East 2 picking up right after the events of East 1. This connection led to a 1989 release of the two games together, which is how they've generally been distributed ever since. The games have also had numerous remakes, starting with East Eternal in 1997 for Windows, then East 1 and 2 Complete in 2001 again for Windows. This edition was then ported in 2003 to the PlayStation 2 under the name East 1 and 2 Eternal Story, then East 1 and 2 DS was released in 2008 in Japan and had the first appearance for the game in the West in 2009 localized by Atlas, titled Legacy of East, Books 1 and 2. Not long after that, a PSP release happened in Japan in 2009, and this version was localized by Xseed Games, releasing in 2011. While that was happening though, a remaster of Complete was made named Chronicles that released in Japan in December of 2009. This version was improved later on again by Xseed and released as the game I played, East 1 and 2 Chronicles Plus in 2013 for Windows. Oh, you thought we were done? Not quite. The final ports that exist so far are the mobile ports of East 1 and 2 as separate games. East 1 got its port in 2015 for iOS and Android, and East 2 got one in 2016. Yeah, it's seen a lot of ports in the 30 plus years of its existence, to the point that I may have even missed some. At pretty much every stop, the games have gotten consistent praise, although the original East 1 and 2 combined game takes the cake for receiving Game of the Year awards. Nowadays, no one is handing out those awards for these East games, since the visuals may have been updated, but the gameplay remains very much the same, and has become a relic of a previous time in gaming. That's how many people take these games nowadays, as a historical relic, which is fine, but I argue that there is still merit in playing these games as games and not just history lessons. What are these Ancient East games then, and why are they worth playing over the newer entries of the series? The main protagonist for the East series is Adol Kristen, a red-haired, sword-wielding, strapping young lad with a penchant for heroics. He probably gets more characterization in future games, but in these games he's just starting off on his adventures. Adol starts off on a ship sailing towards the island of Asteria, which has been blocked off by something called the Storm Wall. Unsurprisingly, the journey does not go smoothly, and Adol is shipwrecked, washing up luckily on the shore of Asteria near a small village. He is nursed back to health by the residents and then sets off on a journey to slay the demons that have infested the island since the storm wall appeared, find the culprits behind the storm wall, and discover more about the ancient civilization of East that once populated the island. The second game is a direct sequel to the first game, so describing the plot would spoil the first game, but suffice to say Adol gets into more heroics in the second game. The games may be short, it took 5 hours to beat East 1 and 8 for East 2, but the story is quite well constructed. There's quite a bit of lore all around the land, especially if you do some additional exploring and talking to NPCs. It's not the deepest story, but it's a great start and introduction to this land, the common elements of the series narrative, and of course the man himself, Adol. Gameplay is where we get quite unique, mainly with the combat system. East 1 and 2 employs a combat system called the bump system, where, instead of having a key that you press to attack enemies, Adol automatically attacks enemies when he bumps into them. If you attack enemies straight on though, they damage you right back, so in order to not die from enemy retaliation, you need to hit them from an angle. This system takes some getting used to. I had never played anything like it before, but with practice, it will become second nature. Give it some time and eventually you'll feel great moving around, mowing down enemies left and right. One other significant game design in Ys 1 and 2 is regenerating health in certain circumstances, such as towns or when standing still on the map, which is believed to be the first instance of this system in games. Ys 2 mostly keeps this gameplay system intact with one major addition, which is magic. Unlike the standard sword attacks, magic does have a dedicated button for its use, but most enemies can still be taken down easily with swords, so I advise just going with that. The bosses, on the other hand, are much harder. For both games, the bosses add new elements of difficulty, from barriers that damage you as you try to get to the boss, to firing projectiles out at all angles. Ys 2 steps up the boss game even further by adding in bosses that can only be damaged by magic, or are completely immune to magic. While the early on enemies are going to be tough as you get experience both personally and in-game, the bosses are where the real challenge lies. Most took me several tries to beat, and it did make it very satisfying when I finally succeeded. It can be frustrating though, and the whole bump combat system does throw people off. The combat is great once you adjust to it, so it wasn't my main area of frustration when playing these games. The game is sometimes unclear about what you're supposed to do to advance the story. That's where the frustration comes in. What specific item do I need to take to which NPC to activate one barrier to move aside so I can advance? Personally, I had to play with a guide for most of the game to find out what to do next, and sometimes to help me navigate the labyrinths in the dungeons. The site I've linked to in the description advises those who want to play the original way to take notes because sometimes the steps to proceed are quite vague. Luckily, it's not an extremely long game, but I and other players I know definitely had several moments of what the heck am I supposed to be doing next? Visually, the game has been well updated while being as faithful as possible to the original design and style. Since even the remake at this point is a decade old, don't expect the fanciest graphics, which I'm sure you can tell just by watching the footage. However, there are some great still art pieces, and the character designs, I'd say, are the standout part of the new art, which is perhaps the most important part in my opinion. Musically, the game has a great blend of rock pieces for exploration and battle music, and quieter, more reflective pieces for character moments and town themes. The game's soundtrack was excellently updated to give it a modern sound while staying faithful to the original music. A top-tier soundtrack from top to bottom. Since the Ys games, though, are generally self-contained adventures entirely playable without prior knowledge of the series, why is it worth it to go back to these games? Thank you question I made up, but that I've seen a lot of people ask. I do have to note before I answer this that I'm taking other people's answers to this question because I haven't played the other games in the series. I did play these games first though because I found the answers I was given for why I should start with these ones compelling. Sure, the Ys games aren't as tightly woven together as say the Trails games, but there is a canon timeline and an arcing story for the games. Adol is the protagonist through almost all the games, and the first two games form a crucial part of his backstory and the lore of the series. You'll miss details in later titles if you don't play these games, and to me, that was worth it to start with Ys 1 and 2. They're also short, so you don't have to worry about spending too much time waiting before you can get into the other games in the series. You can start with whichever you like, but if you want more information from people more knowledgeable than me on this topic, check out the website link I put in the description. Ys 1 and 2, as is to be predicted, was a few things. A fascinating video game history lesson, a solid introduction to the Ys series, and an all-around fun game. It won't be hitting my Game of the Year list, certainly, but I had a good time with it and am glad I invested my time into playing it. The game makes me excited to play more Ys games in the future, with Ys Origins likely being the next game I play, probably sometime in early 2020. If you want to jump into the Ys series, go ahead and pick up Ys 1 and 2 Chronicles Plus, or any of the other games if you want the more modern gaming experience. Either way, I hope you enjoyed the video. Leave a like because that helps the channel grow and gives me that nice dopamine rush that gets me through the day. Comment below any thoughts on the Ys series and subscribe for more video game content. I hope you have a great day and happy gaming.